and welcome back to part 2 of talking about mooting, what it involves, the steps that go into it. Just a quick reminder for those who might have forgotten what part 1 was about. If you haven't watched part 1, make sure you go and check that out. So this video will hopefully make a lot more sense. Part 1, I was just talking about what is mooting, and I was also talking about some of the steps that go into it. So I started talking about reading the scenario, making sure you've read the scenario carefully, you understood the facts, got a summary of those facts. Talking about research, so researching into the cases that you are going to use, those authorities you're going to use, and then the development of your skeletons, so make sure that your skeleton is clear and detailed. This time I'm going to talk about the steps that go, so once you've got your skeleton, what you need to do before you actually go and present your oral arguments before the judge or judges. And so what this involves, once you've got your skeleton, you need to be organising your cases, organising the legislative provisions that you're going to use, etc. And this is where bundles are going to become very useful. And so what is useful for mooting is having binders. Again, I'm speaking from my experiences. I had to have at least 3 binders. One for me, obviously, one for the judge, and one for your opposing counsel. So, if you're the appellant, the opposing respondent; if you're the respondent, the opposing appellant. And so you need these 3, and these bundles are going to be important because they're going to contain the materials you're going to use. They're going to contain your skeleton, so that the judge and opposing counsel can follow through. And as well as your skeleton needing to be organised, your bundle needs to be organized. Bundle, what I mean by bundle is this. And what is useful to have for your bundle is to have tags, dividing tags. So this one is numbered, and this allows me to separate the cases, each of the materials that I'm going to use, and that just helps to keep things organized, because you want it to be clear and organized as possible. Because if it's all over the place, it's not clearly marked out, then A, you're going to struggle to be able to point the judge in the right direction, and B, the judge, you're just going to see the judge trying to work out what to do and working out where they need to be, etc. So it's important that if you can get file dividers, brilliant, use them. What's also useful, and what I found quite useful, is I not only had file dividers to separate each of the different materials, each of the different cases, for example, that I was going to be using, going to be referring to, but I also had like these little sticky labels, and essentially what I would do is I would attach them to each part of the judgment I was using. So for example, if in a case I was going to be referring to the case a few times because I was the main case referred to in the scenario, or there's a lot of good points that comes from that case, then I would separate out and I would mark it 1, mark it 2, and mark it 3. And so what I would be saying during all submissions is I would be saying, I'll take your lordship to where it is tab 1. So in this case, it'd be tab 1 where it's marked red, and I'll be saying tab 1 where it's marked 1. And so the judge can see, oh, okay, tab 1, and then where it's marked 1. So he's referring to this paragraph. He's going to talk about this paragraph at this point. And then later on, I might say, again, can I refer you to tab 1 where it's marked 2? And so the judge goes, so they're talking about this part at this point. And so again, that just allows things to be more organized, and it just helps the judge to work through your materials. One thing that is useful when you're gathering your materials and printing them off, and is to make sure, first of all, that you've got what is known as a case note. The case note is essentially a summary of the facts and what the court held. Now, these are available when you go into Westlaw, for example. You are able to log on and you are able to get the actual report of the case, and by clicking on for report, you get the actual report, and what you'll see is it'll have the summary of the name of the case, it'll have the summary of the facts, and then obviously it'll have a summary of what was held in that case. And that's important to have for every case that you are going to be using. It looks more professional to do that, so it's important to have that case note on what the case is about, and that's useful for you because then you've got it there. It's useful for the judge in case they either need reminding of the case, or if you need to refer to specific facts in relation to that case. One thing that is also useful to do is when you're printing out the materials that you're going to use, is to go and highlight the relevant parts, because when you come to print out, you only need to print out the case note and the pages that contain the relevant paragraphs, the relevant sections of the judgment that you are going to use. So you don't need to print out the entire case, that's not needed. All you need to do is print out the relevant parts. But of course that relevant part might, yes, include your paragraph 99 of the judgment, but it also might include on that specific sheet of paper 5 other paragraphs. So what's useful is to go and highlight over the relevant part of paragraph 99. And so when you're going through the actual moot and when you're guiding the judge through the materials that you're going to be referring to that as part of your arguments, the judge can say, okay, I know where they are, because they can see it highlighted. It just makes it clearer. It's about just making it clear, making it organised, and being able to also guide the judge through what you're trying to argue. The easier you can make it for the judge by having an organised bundle, by having things highlighted and clearly made out, the better, because ultimately it's going to just help just with the flow of proceedings rather than things being delayed because the judge is like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up with where you are, or I'm trying to work out where this is, etc. So easier you can make it, the better. And so it's important to have an organised bundle. Also, you'll have at least 3, one for the judge, one for yourself, one for opposing counsel. And then obviously once you've got things printed off at the same time or afterwards, depending on how you wish to do it, you need to be preparing your oral submissions. You need to be preparing of the arguments that you're going to make during the moot itself. So one thing that I did was to make sure that I had a couple of sheets of paper of the arguments that I was going to make. Now, some people might like to type up everything they're going to say. Some people might like to just have bullet points of the key points that you want to make. It will be up to you what you want to do. I prefer to just do it as bullet points, and the reason for that is because there's a slight risk of just typing everything you're going to say out, and there's a couple risks. First of all, moots are timed. So for example, our moot was 50. You had 15 minutes to present your arguments, and the risk is that unless you practice through it and know your timings, but also recognizing that the judge might intervene during your submissions, which will obviously take up time. If you just got a one long speech, then that might present some timing issues, but also just having one long speech can risk you just spending your time reading from it, and that's not what you want to do during actual oral submissions, because you want to have your eyes on the judge and you want to be able to be engaging with the judge. So I made a note, because I was the respondent, I had the opportunity to rebut any arguments by my opposing counsel. Rebut being to challenge some of those arguments that they were making and basically try and convince the judge why their arguments don't stand up, why they should just be discounted. And then I've got like the reminder of the submission and the individual points, but then I've broken it down further. What I've also done is, and what is quite useful, is I've marked obviously that remind me of the cases that I'm going to refer to at that particular point, but I've also referred to the tab that I'm going to be referred to. And that's useful because you need to know where your materials are in the bundle. You need to know where they are. You need to know what specific parts you're going to be referring to at what specific point in your moot. And so if you don't know, then how are you supposed to guide the judge? You can't be in a situation where I'm not sure where, I think it was tab 2, can't quite remember, because that's not going to help anyone. That's not helping you, it's not helping the judge, not helping opposing counsel, not helping anyone. So I've got here the case of El Husky at paragraphs 82 to 83, tab 2, where it is marked 1 and 2. So that just reminded me, if I forget, I can quickly look at it and go, okay, it's there. And then I can just quickly refer to, rather than trying to guess and etc. What is also useful, what I've done here is left some space for in case any arguments are made that I make note of. I've got annotations a little bit here as well. And the whole idea is just obviously having been planned, being ready to present your oral arguments and know what you're going to present. But also when you're thinking about, and this applies to the skeleton as well, is to think about timing. One thing I found in the first round is I wasn't able to present all of the arguments I wanted to make during the actual moot. So I had like 3 submissions, but I only really ended up discussing about 2 of them. And that was because of timing, obviously based on any interventions the judge might make. And so what I did going forward is I just reduced it down to 2 submissions, and that did make it much easier. So you do need to think about time in terms of how many submissions you want to make, and that will be important because obviously you need to be trying to keep them with the time as much as you can. Making sure that you're preparing your oral submissions, and also it's a good thing to go away before the moot and to practice to speak. Whether you're speaking out loud in your room or speaking in front of someone, and they get them to pretend to be the judge or whatever. And that can be useful because then that can help you work out timing, practice speaking out loud, etc. So practicing those skills before the actual moot itself. And also it might help you to rethink something. So for example, if you've put something and you're thinking, ooh, maybe I should have mentioned this instead, or maybe I should mention this as well, then you can make a note of it, and obviously during the moot you can present it. One thing that might happen during your moot before the moot itself is you might be given the skeleton of your opposing counsel, and that's a good opportunity for you to read through their skeleton and start thinking about so these are the points they're going to argue, and start thinking about the rebuttals you're going to make. Start thinking about any loopholes. They're going to pick your skeleton apart. They're going to try and pick it apart and go, oh, they can't argue that. Does it make sense? Or, oh, well, they forgot to look at that case when it said this or whatever. And you've got to do the same. You've got to pick holes in their argument and try and anticipate what they're going to say. And so you can break away their points. So if you're the senior appellant, you'll be able to break away some of the points of your opposing counsel before they've even got a chance to speak. Which could be quite useful. But of course, you need to know clearly. You need to know your arguments first. If your arguments are not clear, then how can you really start picking apart the other side's arguments? You need to make sure that yours is clear as well. And it's also useful to think in terms of, again, relating back to skeleton, but also applying here. Thinking about, well, if I was opposing counsel, what would I be arguing? So you're trying to anticipate, trying to identify some of the weaknesses in your own arguments beforehand, and then you can quickly think of any rebuttals or any defenses you want to put. So you're thinking, that point doesn't sound clear. What if the judge asks this? And so you're just trying to anticipate. Obviously, you're not going to anticipate everything, but what you can do is try and be as prepared as you can be. So I'm going to leave this part here. This is part 2, covering. So once you've got your skeleton, you're gathering your materials, print them off, and make sure that you've got your bundle nice and organized, and then preparing your oral arguments ready for the actual moot itself. In part 3, I'm going to talk about the moot itself, talk about what happens, talk about some of the skills that can be developed from there, and some useful bits of advice in relation to that. I hope you found this part interesting. If you stuck along to this part, I really appreciate it. I also appreciate that not everyone finds mooting interesting, or might not be a particularly interesting video, but I hope you have found this useful, at least entertaining. If you have, don't forget to do the usual things like follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can subscribe to the channel by clicking the bottom right hand corner. You can hit the notification bell to keep up to date. Share the video with others, let other people know about it. And yeah, hope to see you in part 3.